Hello from Gardening at Douentza here in Ireland, and you're very welcome to this video all about the hedgehog plant, or Massonia, which is a fabulous summer dormant South African bulb. Now this has some very quirky things about it, not least of all its black onyx nectar pools that you'll find at the base of its flowers. So let's learn all about this intriguing and quirky plant, and if you're lucky enough to get your hands on one, how you should grow it. So you're very welcome to this video all about the amazing Massonia, and I just love this quirky plant for a variety of reasons. Its pollinator is very interesting, but what really grabs me is the appearance, which you can't just see now, of nectar pools at the base of its flowers. So let's talk about why a plant would need such a thing. Now this is a bulb from South Africa. There are about 6 species in the Massonia group. It is summer dormant, so it grows in winter, as we see, and it's a monocot plant with 2 large pustulate leaves, which means that the leaves have a very interesting knobbly texture, definitely a feature. Very big wide leaves in time, and the plant has a flower which is very close to the ground, or the soil level in this particular case. It has long anthers, and the pustulata species, which is the one I have here, has the longest of all anthers. And as if all that wasn't enough, it is also nicely scented, but at night. But the really surprising thing about this plant is its jelly-like nectar pools, which are at the very base of the anthers. Now when I saw these things first, I was both repelled and enticed at the same time. When I first saw the black pool at the base of my flower, I thought, what has happened there? Has some fly died on it? Is it a little bit goopy? I stuck my finger in and realised that it was a bit liquid, viscousy, and I began to imagine that this plant was pollinated by flies or some carrion-loving insects, but that's not the case at all. In fact, the nectar is very viscous. 400% more viscous than an equivalent sugar solution, which would stop insects from eating it at all. I guess it's just too sticky and they'd come to a bad end when their wings got clogged up. So insects are not the pollinators. In fact, the nectar in these plants increases in volume as evening goes on, indicating that the plants are expecting some nighttime pollinator. And it emits a smell, a yeasty kind of smell, some have said a bit like damp sheep. Personally, I smelt no damp sheep in my house, but I guess the pollinator of this plant does get it. In fact, the Massonia is pollinated by rodents. And up until this point in time, it had only been thought that certain plants in the Protea family were pollinated by rodents. But 2 of the rodents that actually pollinate the Massonia are also known to pollinate those Proteas. However, with the Massonia came a new discovery, because it was discovered that a certain gerbil also pollinates this plant. He was not known to do anything of the sort up until then. But he's attracted at night by the yeasty smell, and he comes nosing in with his snout down into the nectar pools to get himself a nice little feed. And in so doing, his snout and his fur gets covered in the pollen on these anthers, and he carries it inadvertently to either pollinate the same plant, but probably more likely to pollinate other flowers that he'll visit in the course of his night. Also, the gerbil's feces is completely clogged up with the pollen, because I guess when the animal goes back to its hole in the evening, he starts licking his fur to clean the pollen off it, and that ends up in in his digestive system. And very interesting is the fact that the nectar contains a sugar called xylose. And even though it's only at 3%, this xylose had previously been associated with something that rodent pollinators sought out. So what are the characteristics of rodent pollinated plants? First of all, the flowers have to be dull in colour. And the flowers need to be robust, positioned close to the ground. They need to have wiry anthers and copious amounts of easily accessible nectar secreted in the evening. It has to have a yeasty odour and a stigma nectar distance of 10 millimetres. The plants also need to be winter flowering. And I think Massonia fits the bill here. It ticks all the boxes in these different categories. So how are you going to care for a Massonia bulb if you're lucky enough to get your hands on one? And the main thing to remember is that it is winter growing and therefore summer dormant. So at the end of summer, this plant should start coming out of dormancy by itself. You'll see the leaves emerging, and this should happen without giving it any extra water. I did give mine extra water, but you shouldn't need that. Once the plant starts coming up, then you need to water it. It is something that needs to dry out between waterings, and if you have hard water, then you'll need to use rainwater on it. In winter, you can bring it into the house or keep it in a frost-free greenhouse, but what is important is that it gets as much light as possible. Once the leaves show signs of yellowing, probably around March, then reduce watering until the leaves disappear, and then keep it completely dry in summer. Repotting should be done when the bulbs are dormant, probably around about September, just before they kick into active growth. And you need a well-drained mix with this one. So you might use 1 part, say John Innes number 3, 1 part peat, and then 1 part grit and 1 part perlite. Basically 50% inorganic to 50% organic. And the peat is necessary because, as with a lot of South African plants, they tend to be sensitive and need ericaceous potting mix. Pot the bulb with its nose just a little bit below, a couple of centimetres below the surface. And this is probably the best policy if you're not sure of the depth of a particular bulb, because over time it'll work its way up to the surface if it needs to come further up or further down. And the roots are quite forgiving, so if you do damage some of the roots, don't worry too much, it'll probably recover. Now with this plant, they very seldom produce offsets, so if you want to propagate it, you're going to have to do that by seed. The good news is that the plant is self-fertile, so even if you just have one plant, if you hand pollinate it, by chance, if you don't have any gerbils knocking around your house, if you hand pollinate it, you should be able to get viable seed. However, the seed is just a little bit quirky. The capsules, they will begin to dry over time, and you need to leave them and let the seed mature properly. Now in summer, don't store this seed in the fridge. It needs to be stored warm to do some kind of extra maturing before it can be viable. So the best time to sow seed is in September. So sow seed at the beginning of September, and the seed needs a temperature range, so it needs about 10 degrees at night, a dip at night, and 20 degrees during the day. So you might leave them outdoors, or you might try putting them on a heat mat during the day and then, I don't know, sticking them outside the door at night. In any case, hopefully they will germinate and you will soon have seedlings on your hands. The seedlings will tend to flower, or try to flower, probably in their 3rd year, and then hopefully you will go on to have lots and lots of different Massonia and can share them with all your friends. And just as a final note, the genus Dobenia is very, very similar to Massonia. Both take exactly the same care. There's been a bit of difficulty with the taxonomy of these two, but anyway, I won't go into that. So if you see Dobenia, then do grab that. And there is one that's on my absolute wish list. So it's Dobenia Zaheri, and this is a gorgeous Massonia-like plant that produces orange flowers. Can you imagine? It would be absolutely wonderful to get my hands on something like that. So that's something I'm looking out for going forward. Yeah, love it. Love Massonia. And I hope that I have managed to convince you that it is a plant to look out for, and maybe you'll try one if you get the chance. What do you think of the nectar pools, the jelly-like nectar pools? Do they repel you, or do you think they look like sparkling onyx, as I've come to feel over time? Do let me know in the comments down below. Okay, so that's it for the moment. I hope you liked this specialised video and that you're all keeping well, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!